Okay, good. So, good evening. My name is Saj Hussain. Welcome to this Get Your Property Questions Answered even with me. So, this is a live session streaming out to various different platforms. Whether you're watching on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, just ping me a message in the comments box. Let me know you can hear me, see me loud and clear, and then we'll get started in just a few moments. As I said, this is live, unless of course you're watching the recording afterwards, in which case it isn't. Right now, today, we're broadcasting live. So what I want to do is answer your property questions. So some people have sent those through. I'll start with those first. Depending on how we get on time-wise, this session will run for about half an hour. And then I'll jump onto any other questions that are coming through and answer those. If I don't get all those answered, then the intention is to run this again next Monday evening at 8:30, and then we'll do some of those then. So first of all, let's get started with the first question I've got from Kenny from Property Dealmaker. How do you raise finance for your first project without a track record? So I've just got these printed out in front of me, these few questions. I'm going to start with these first. So Kenny, that's a great question. If you're starting out in property, you're looking for investment, how do you become investable so that people want to invest their funds with you to help you get moving forward in your property journey, and also for them to produce a great return? Because ultimately, if we think about it, why is it that they want to invest with you? They want to invest with you because they're looking to get a return on their money. They're not doing it out of necessarily the kindness of their heart or because you're some kind of charity. They're investing with you because they're looking for a return on their money. Now, if you put yourselves in the shoes of the potential investor who's going to invest funds into you, think about what is it that's going through their mind? What concerns, what reservations may they have that might be putting them off in terms of potentially investing with you? And as you highlighted, one of those is when you're starting out, you're brand new. So what does that mean? But from a risk point of view, in terms of the chances of things going wrong, in the perceived, the perception, even from the investor point of view, is that the risk is much higher. The risk is higher because you haven't been through this process before, so there'll be a steep learning curve for you, and the chances of mistakes increase. So what that means is if they've got their money invested with you, there's a higher probability that actually they might lose out, not get their money back, not get the return they were expecting. Things might take much longer, they might cost much more in terms of that particular project. So when you're speaking to a potential investor, particularly that for the first time, you've got to have these things in your mind and think about how can you alleviate these concerns? How can you reduce the risk for somebody to want to invest with you and for you to become more investable? Now, the first thing is, in terms of risk, think about how can you reduce the risk in potentially the project that you're doing. So if we take a step back, first of all, before we start talking about risk, if you look at the outcome ultimately you want to achieve from that project, let's say you're purchasing a property, you're looking to renovate, and you're going to add some value and then sell it on for a profit. Just for example, let's say that's the strategy you're looking to follow. You're looking for some investment to come in to either purchase a property, renovate it, and sell it on. So the risks that the person's going to be thinking about is, what if it takes a lot longer to do the renovation? What if there's uncertainties that come from that renovation in terms of things that come out from the woodwork, if you like, when you start doing the renovation and the costs go up? What if there's other problems that you face that you haven't experienced, like, for example, builders, the relationship breaking down partway through the renovation and then walking off the job? All of these things can impact the outcome that you're effectively trying to achieve, which is adding value and selling that property. What if you go to market with that property, you manage to get it done in time, in budget, you get to market, and then find the market's very slow? Like, for example, right now, the London market is very slow. In terms of it's softened, properties are not selling as quickly, some prices are dropping. In Birmingham, the Midlands, where I am, prices are still strong, they're buoyant, but they could change just like that, particularly with all the economic political uncertainty we're facing right now. The market could change. So you could go to the market and you could find, actually, your product's not selling. The property, that beautiful house you've created, is not selling. So all of these are the factors, the risks that are going through a potential investor's mind, and you've got to think about how can you deal with those, how can you eliminate those. So let's look at some suggestions in terms of what you can do. The first one, the biggest one in terms of your lack of experience of doing this strategy before, is think about who can you align with you in that particular transaction to who has the experience so that it can reduce the overall risk. So for example, Let's say you've got somebody, you're cutting into the deal, it might be a very small percentage even, that you're borrowing their credibility because they're involved in this project and they're going to get some return out of that. It could be somebody that's done a number of these, could be somebody that's a little bit more experienced than you, it could be somebody that's much more experienced than you, it could be somebody in shape of a mentor, for example. Whatever it might be, it's that credibility of somebody else you're borrowing so that you're reducing the chances of this deal going wrong. Because now you've got another set of eyes that are watching what's happening and helping you get through that particular transaction. So that's the first one, that's the big one. It's reduce the risk for your potential investors by having somebody more experienced on board. Then the other one is being absolutely clear in terms of what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve. Going back to the example I gave about renovating a property, adding value with a view to selling it on, if that's what you're looking to do, if that's the strategy that you're following, then think about, again, all the risks that could happen within that transaction and what can you do to reduce them. So for instance, let's carrying on with the example of, let's say you go to market and the market is slow and it doesn't sell. What's your backup plan? What's plan B? What's plan C? What's plan D even? What have you done to think through the different scenarios to reassure your potential investor that, hey, look, it may be the first time I'm doing this. The thing is, I've got somebody experienced on board with me that will help reduce the risks of the possibilities of something going wrong. What could go wrong? It could cost more, it could take longer, it could have issues with this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. And here's all the contingencies I've thought about in terms of how we would deal with those. What other concerns do you have about investing with me, with this being my first project? So you deal with some of the bulky ones and then you turn it around and you ask them what the concerns are. What you're now trying to do is establish, are there any genuine objections that you could deal with to help with? So for example, they might be saying, if I'm the one that's putting all the money in, you might walk away from that particular deal if it's going wrong and we're left with all the problems. So that could be a concern, for example. It could be an objection your potential investor has. Now, you could fire off a number of things you could do to deal with that, or my preferred way of dealing with that is to ask them, okay, I understand what you're saying. What is it that you'd want to see from me in order for that to not be a concern for you? Effectively, what you're saying to them is, well, tell me, what does that actually mean? And what they might be talking about is for you putting some money in. It may be that you can put some in. It may be in a position that you can't, but it might be you can offer certain guarantees that you can put into place. That means, again, it alleviates that concern. So, for example, something else you could do is have the property in the investor's name, for example. Now, I'm not suggesting you do all these things. I'm just giving you examples of things you can do to deal with different objections. If the property is in their name, that might reduce some of their anxiety about walking away and being a problem. At least they still own the property. They own the property. They own the asset, particularly if they're putting all the money into it. Now, let's say you're getting a bridging loan to purchase it. If you're taking on a bridging loan to do that particular purchase, then what you don't want, or what your investor won't want, is for them to take on the debt, the loan, and for them to be putting their money in, the property's in their name, you're going to do all the work, and if you walk away, they're left with a problem. That's probably a bit too risky for them. So hopefully, Kenny, this is giving you some ideas. It's one of those topics I could spend hours on in terms of helping you with that. But just to give you an idea, in terms of there are a few things that you can do to make sure you become more investable when you're looking to raise investment from other people. I think that's my phone buzzing away. I hope it's not causing too much of a distraction. So I'm going to jump on to the next question that I've got here from Al Ahmed of Q7 Security Limited, and he's asking, how do I find B&B property, the holy grail of property investors, below market value property? Where do we find these properties? Well, the reality is they are everywhere and then they're nowhere. What do I mean by that? Well, they're everywhere in the sense that there's mostly circumstances that create a transaction which tends to be below market value rather than the property itself. So what I mean by that, it may be that somebody is a distress sale, somebody needs to sell because they're going through a divorce, somebody's inherited a property, somebody's in financial difficulty, somebody's moving away, relocating to another country, they need to get a sale done quickly, somebody's in a chain, the chain is broken, they need somebody to fix that so they can all continue with their various purchases. These are circumstances that can create a situation where you can purchase a property below market value. Now, also you have to think about, when I talk about they're nowhere, they're everywhere and nowhere, they're nowhere in the sense that you've got to get a number of other things lined up to make sure below market value is something that's realistic and possible. So let me give you some context about what I'm talking about. So I'm in Birmingham, we're in 2019 right now, and I'm not running any marketing campaigns looking to buy property below market value. And you say, well, why not? Well, the reason is, first of all, the market's quite strong, as I mentioned earlier. It's very buoyant. What that means is there's plenty of buyers. In fact, there's many more buyers than there are sellers right now for the right type of properties. So there is no real reason for the sellers to sell those property for a discount. Now, if I roll back, say, 2013, 2012, when I was actively campaigning, running marketing campaigns, looking for people in those circumstances I mentioned earlier on, and my proposal, my proposition to them is, I can purchase your property fast for cash, completions in 7 days or a month or whatever it might be, whatever the various different offerings were, and it was ones that I could deliver depending on how the transaction was structured. Ultimately, what I was offering the vendors was, I could give you certainty and I can give you flexibility in that transaction, meaning that I can give you certainty, yes, this is done, and you've got the peace of mind that you're going to get the money in the time frame that you need. Flexibility in the sense that if you need to do it next week, or if you need to do it on a specific day in 6 weeks' time, whatever it might be, we can work around that. And the investment to them is that I want more equity in their deal, i.e., I want some discount of the purchase. So what I'm doing is creating a situation where I'm giving them what they need, and that what they need is worth more than the discount that they're given on the property, if that makes sense. So, for instance, if someone's offering you £10,000 below the market value for you to be able to purchase that property from them, and then the seller, it means to them that they're going to get that lump sum of cash, and they're going to be able to do another transaction that they might be doing, or they can move on with their lives by a specific date or whatever it might be. The value they attach to that is significantly more than the financial discount that they're offering you. These are the circumstances and the situations that create below market value property. Right now, if I'm marketing for below market value, which I'm not, as I mentioned earlier on, but if I was, let's say I was running adverts where I'm saying I can purchase your house fast for cash. And if I'm going to visit a vendor, I'm talking to them, I say, look, if you need, I can get this done in 4 weeks for you, or whatever it might be. Who am I competing with? Who's my competition in that circumstance or in that situation? My competition are possibly other people like me who are looking to buy property, but also my main competition are estate agents. Estate agents is where a vendor would typically go when they're looking to sell a property. So why would they sell to me? They sell to me because I can offer something that the agent can't. But if the estate agent is turning up and saying, hey, you've got a great house here, I can sell this for you, no problem at all. I've got 7 people waiting. I've got 10 people waiting to queue up to see a property like this. If that's what they have available and that's what they can offer, particularly in a market like this where there's lots of people looking and lots of people want to buy, then in that situation, I'm not able to offer much more than what the agent can do. So it doesn't make sense for me to be marketing in that way. Now, if you think about, I've talked about where it doesn't work and how it may not work. Let's talk about how it could work and where it could work. So if you're looking for discounted property, particularly if I kind of give examples of the stuff that I've done before, because that's what I'd rather do, talk about my experience rather than just theory. Many of the below market value properties I was buying would have been typically in, say, ex-council estates, if you like. What does that mean? They're properties that were built by the local authority, where often many of the people, the occupants in those properties, have exercised their right to buy and they've purchased those properties. They purchased those properties 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, that kind of period of time. The mortgages are very easy to get at that time, regardless of the circumstances people are in. So maybe you've heard of ninja mortgages, no income, no job, no problem. You could get a mortgage if you had a pulse. You could get a mortgage. That's how crazy the mortgage market was, which ultimately what led to the crash that we had in 2008. But pre that period, it was very easy to get mortgages, very high loan to value mortgages. In fact, Northern Rock would give you a mortgage for the full amount that you want to purchase property for, and then some for you to enjoy, have a holiday, spend some money on the property. There were 110%, 115% mortgages available, which today sounds crazy. But what it was doing, it was creating massive debt for that individual who wasn't necessarily thinking about that moment in time. But fast forward to, say, 2009, 10, 11, when there was negative equity, some of those people couldn't sell, or sometimes there was equity, but people needed to sell or they couldn't remortgage, then those were the perfect time in terms of finding these type of transactions where you find a solution to someone's pain, someone's problem, and then you're acquiring that property. But some of these situations still exist. So if you look at some of the northern towns in England, that's if I was looking for below market value property right now, I'd look for these type of areas where the house prices are lower. You're not looking for below market value properties, or I wouldn't be on £300,000 houses. You'd be looking for sub £100,000 type properties. So which towns can you still buy properties for maybe under £100,000? You're getting, say, 10 or maybe 15% discount, which is in this market, which is very good. So you're building in equity straight away. Let's say you get 15% discount, that's 15 grand. You're bagging straight away on a transaction. And hey, let's say you've done, 2 of those in a year. You've got 2 deals where you've got £15,000 off each one. That's £30,000 of equity that you've effectively acquired in a transaction. And if you think about it, that's more than the average salary in this country just from 2 transactions. So it's definitely a great strategy, but it's about getting the right strategy for the right time of the property market in the right location. That combination absolutely needs to work for below market value to be effective. Again, if I look at Birmingham right now in terms of properties, people often say, oh, I'm going to auction, I'm going to buy properties at the auction because that's where the deals are, right? Because they've been watching Homes Under the Hammer, and that's where we're going to go and find our deals. We're going to go in the auction room, get one of those cheap properties, and I've got myself a below market value property. What I'd say to you is, have you looked at the auction sale prices recently? Have you looked at what they're achieving? So you might find, these houses with a guide price of 10,000 and 20,000 and silly prices like that, which we see quite frequently in the auctions, Birmingham auctions. But the reality is, you are not going to buy a house for 20 or 30,000 pounds. It might be 230,000 pounds that house actually sells for in the room. These low guide prices are just designed to get people in the room. It's designed to get a bit of a frenzy going. It's designed to get the interest, get a crowd of people, get people talking about it. That's really what they're doing, the marketing tricks that they're using to get people into the auction. The reality is that property will sell for what someone's prepared to pay for it. And if you're the successful bidder in an auction room, remember, you were the individual that was prepared to pay more than anybody else in that room. Now, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that, but it doesn't mean necessarily you're picking up below market value property. If you are looking at, say, for example, an auction to buy below market value, let's say you've done your research beforehand, you've worked out the property's worth £100,000, and for you it's only viable, let's say 80 or 85,000. That's where you should draw the line. So when you're bidding in the room, you go to that figure and that's it. You sit on your hand. And when the auctioneer says to you, you've got another 1,000, you've come all this way, you don't want to miss out on for 1,000, they're just pushing up the price. At that point, you stop because that's not viable for you. You've got to disconnect the emotion and the logic. That's where many people make mistakes in auction rooms. They're thinking they're going to buy a deal. They get the emotion mixed up. They're not thinking in a logical way. And, I've not bought many properties from auction. The reality is actually I haven't purchased any properties from auction, but I've sold through the auctions. If you think about it, it feels strange because actually sometimes you can make a profit just by selling because the frenzy that's created in an auction environment. So when we're looking for below market value, we want to be absolutely clear what it's worth to you in a clear, logical way without attaching the emotion to it, what you're prepared to pay for it, and then that figure is where it's ultimately true below market value for you. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that's useful. Let me see how we're doing for time. We'll do, so we've got a question here. Thank you. So we've got a question from Arif Khan. How much money do you need to start rent to rent? Let's talk about rent to rent. What is rent to rent? Rent to rent is taking on a whole property. So we're in one of our offices right now. We have several office rooms in this building. So we take on a building, say a house with, say it's a 4-bedroom house with 2 reception rooms. Ultimately, what you're doing, I'm not sure what's going on outside. Apologies for the background noise. You're taking on that family house and you might be splitting it into, say, 6 rooms that you're going to let out. And those 6 rooms you're going to let out individually. Let's say you're renting them out at what, I don't know, say £400, so that's 4, 8, 12, £2,400 is what you're bringing in as gross rent. You might be renting that property from the landlord at maybe say £1,000. So you're taking on a property at £1,000, you're re-letting it or subletting it or whatever phraseology you want to use out to tenants individually and bringing in 2,400. Now you've got some running costs that you need to remove from that. Let's say it's £500 of running costs for gas, electric, water, council tax, TV license, cleaners, gardeners, internet, all these things you've got to pay for, property management as well. But it's going to be at least about £500. So you're left with about £1,900. If you've got £1,900 left, you've still got to think about management, maintenance, and voids, right? So before management, maintenance, and voids, you've got say £1,900, and you're paying your landlord £1,000. You're potentially £900 profit there, and even if you've got a couple of other £100 of cost, you're still making £700. So potentially over a year, it's nearly 10 grand a year from a house you don't own that you simply manage. So rent to rent is a brilliant strategy in terms of getting started, but I've talked about this many times before. It's important to think about it as a stepping stone strategy. So you don't build your business empire on rent to rent, you just use it as a way of building up cash flow, and then you should start looking at acquiring assets. That should be the next step. The first step for rent to rent is just be able to build up the income, maybe give up the day job so you can start focusing more on property. So we talked about the running costs, but Arif was asking about the setup costs. What costs do you need or would you incur when you take a property on? Well, this can vary quite considerably, and it's almost a case of how long is a piece of string. But let me give you a few examples of things you should be thinking about, Arif. So first of all, if you're taking on a property, let's say, I'll give you an example again, the ones that I've done. So let's say it was a student house in the past, and now because all the development going on in the city and the purpose-built student blocks being built, more and more students are moving into them, and some of these properties are no longer fit for purpose, and students are no longer wanting to live in them. If I go back and think about when I was a university student, I mean, what our places looked like compared to what some of the places look like now. When my kids are at university recently, they're like chalk and cheese. They're phenomenally beautiful places right now, and before they were a bit of a dive. But there's still many landlords out there that have got these properties that are a little bit of a dive, right? So say they've got one of these student houses that's no longer fit for purpose, students don't want to take it, they miss a student cycle, come November, December, like this time of the year, they still haven't let that property, they're frustrated, it's empty, whereas before it used to let for years and years and years. So now what you have effectively, or what you probably have, is a HMO that's probably compliant from a licensing point of view and possibly has a license as well. So you probably don't have to do too many adaptations on that to get it right for you. So what you're doing is repurposing it from a student market to, say, for example, a professional market. So what that means is you're taking an existing product, you're changing it very slightly, and now you're offering it to somebody different who wasn't looking at it before. Previously, it was students that were looking at it. Now you're advertising and targeting, say, professional tenants, and they're coming and letting rooms individually. So what costs are you going to incur in terms of getting that property up and running? Well, in this particular example, there may not be a huge amount. It may be even furnished. It might be compliant. And it's a case of the only things that you'll be maybe looking to pay is you've got to pay the rent in advance. That might be a month, 2 months, whatever you've negotiated, and possibly a deposit as well. And sometimes, depending on how you negotiate these deals, you can even negotiate a rent-free period, because effectively what you're giving is the landlord peace of mind that they'll get their income every month, without any voids, and that may be what will allow you to negotiate a rent-free period or maybe even a reduced rent. So in that situation, when you're doing those type of transactions, your setup costs are very small. It could be a few £100 even, maybe just getting started. It could be a couple of £1,000s. Let's look at another extreme example. Let's say you're taking on a similar property that's 4 bedrooms and 2 reception rooms, maybe a couple of bathrooms, but it's quite a tired family house. In fact, I went to see one very similar to that early this morning. And let's say it's a property like that. Now, you've got to think about how much money you need to spend on it. The one I went to see was thinking of purchasing, but if it was a rent-to-rent, I've got to be thinking about, okay, I need to get all the fire doors, the fire alarm, make sure the compliance is set up. Then I've got to redecorate the house. I've got to recarpet it. Maybe the kitchens need refreshing. Maybe the bathrooms need refreshing. I need to get all the furniture in. I need a nice double bed, a desk, a chair, a wardrobe, a chest of drawers. In the lounge, I need a nice big TV, a coffee table, dining table, sofa. In the kitchen, I need a washing machine, a microwave, toaster, kettle, maybe even a dishwasher, tumble dryer. Now, I'm just rattling off a number of different things just to give you an idea of the things you might need to think about. When you add all those things up, you could quite easily spend £10,000 trying to get all that done. Carpeting, redecorating, a couple of grand, repairs, minor works, a little bit of freshening up, quite easily be another £1,000. You've got furnishing, £3 grand quite easily in a house of that size. You put in nice quality furnishing, your appliances, your electric goods, your TV, stuff like that. It all adds up, and before you know, you're not going to get much change out of 10 grand. Plus, you've got to pay the rent in advance, and there's a deposit to consider as well. So when you think about all these things, I'll give you two examples. One where you're paying maybe 10 grand to get started, and the other one might be a negligible amount. It could be a few £100s, and there'll be everything in between as well. Now, some people will talk about you should never do those 10 grand investments because they don't make sense. Some people talk about, well, these were small, these ones where they're already up and running, you're not going to make much profit. It's about working out which is right for you. So what do I mean by that? Going back to the student one we talked about, it may be that you're going to be paying a high rent for that because it's already compliant, it's furnished, it's ready to go. You have to spend very little on it. So it might be your monthly rent is significantly higher than the other one we talked about, which is a family house that's a little bit tired. So your profit margin will be lower each month, but you may be content with that because it means your setup costs are lower. So if you haven't got a huge amount of money to get started with, it means you can build up more properties to create that income faster using this method. If on the other hand, you're looking at the house that you're going to renovate, you need to do a significant amount of investment. Just as a quick caveat for you, if you're starting out, I wouldn't recommend this £10,000 type investment, this significant investment, because you're risking too much when you're starting, you're still learning as well. But let's say you were doing something like this. What could be the advantages of this? Well, firstly, you'd look for maybe a significantly reduced market rent. Let's say the market rent was £1,000. It might be you agreeing £700. Then the other thing you want to do is agree a very long period. What I mean by a very long period is 5, 6, 7 years even for the property that you've got control over. So you're going to make significantly more amount of money. Let's say you're making 10 grand a year as an example from that particular property, and you've got it for 7 years. That's £70,000 you're going to make from somebody else's property. Now all of a sudden, when you put into context your £10,000 investment, it doesn't seem too bad. Right, but as I said earlier, it may not be the best place to start. I'm just trying to give you some examples so you understand how this works and for you to be able to choose what might be the right thing for you to do. So looking for a reduced rent, looking for a longer period, looking for rent-free periods, looking for a contribution from the landlord to put some money in to get the property renovated. Sometimes it's not the landlord can't afford to do it, is they might be too busy, not interested, too tired, they're just looking for somebody to do it for them, and they'll quite happily pay for the cost of renovation. They say, well, if you get all this done, I'll pay for it, for example. So all these things are negotiable, and it's looking at the bottom line figures and ultimately about the return on investment. So what that means is how much are you spending to get up and running versus how quickly you're going to get that money back from the monthly cash flow, how long it's going to take. For me, I would say it's really important to be able to do this within, say, a year. So within a year, you've had all your money back. The sooner, the better. But that hopefully gives you an idea and it's a little bit of context. Just looking at time now. So hopefully you found these questions useful. If you've got a question you'd like me to answer, just put it in the comment section below. Even if you're watching this as a recording afterwards, pop it in the comment section below. I'm looking to run these every Monday at 8:30 on the various platforms. That's Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So jump on, please, and let me have your questions. If you don't ask me any questions, this will be a very dull and boring Q&A session with just me and no questions to answer. So I just want to say thank you so much for staying and watching this, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.